On the 20th of February, the US Supreme Court released its opinion with justices divided 6-3 that the president does not have the authority to impose tariffs under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Now, asking the question, what does this mean? Well, all tariffs enacted under the IEEPA have been deemed illegal, and this includes country-by-country or reciprocal tariffs, which range from 34% for China to 10% baseline for the rest of the world, in addition to the other being a 25% tariff imposed by Trump on some goods from Canada, China, and Mexico for what the administration said was their failure to curb the flow of fentanyl. However, this ruling has not impacted any tariffs that remain under Section 232 or 301, in addition to any country-signed trade deals. So in short, this means we still have 50% tariffs on all aluminium and steel imports into the US, including derivative products, except for the UK at 25%. We have 50% tariffs on all semi-finished and finished copper products, 25% tariffs on all automotive and parts, with an exception of 10% to the UK and 15% for the EU, Japan and South Korea. In addition, auto parts that qualify under the US-Mexican-Canadian agreement. Furthermore, we've got 10% tariffs on timber and derivatives, and a further 25% tariffs on semiconductors and certain derivative products. So how has the US administration reacted? Well, a day after the ruling, the US administration outlined 15% tariffs to be effective from 12:01 a.m. Eastern Time on February the 24th, based on Section 122 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1974. Now, this tariff is effective for 150 days, expected to run to the 24th of July, unless authorized by action of Congress. Now, please note the administration indicated here there will be, quote, on the water exemption for articles loaded onto an ocean vessel at the port of loading and in transit on the final mode of transit before 12:01 Eastern Time of February the 24th, and entered for consumption before 12:01 a.m. Eastern Time on February the 28th. So what is Section 122? Well, it permits the president the ability to impose tariffs to address, quote, fundamental international payment problems, end quote. He doesn't need to wait for federal agency to conduct an investigation before he can implement these tariffs. But looking to limitations, the conditions for using Section 122 powers are to remedy, open quotes, large and serious, end quote, US balance of payment deficits, to help correct international balance of payment disequilibrium, or to prevent an imminent and significant depreciation of the dollar. Now, these tariffs are capped at 15% and can only be imposed for 150 days unless you have congressional approval. Now, previously, Section 122 has never been used before. So what don't we know? Well, there was no clarity as to the treatment of recently negotiated agreements with the EU, the UK, and many others. US Trade Representative Greer indicated in a separate statement that the administration would be conducting Section 301 investigations into trading partners' unfair trade practices and continuing existing 301 investigations. Here, we're talking about China and Brazil. Additionally, he indicated that the administration anticipates its recently conducted negotiations with various trade partners may remain in place. Now, Greer noted that our partners have been responsive and engaged in good faith negotiations and agreements despite the pending litigation, and we are confident that all trade agreements negotiated by President Trump will remain in effect. Therefore, it remains unclear whether the 15% Section 122 tariffs will be an additional blanket tariff stacked on such prior agreements, or whether the agreed upon reciprocal tariff rates will continue to apply. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court ruling did not address whether the administration needed to issue refunds for tariff payments, with the US Treasury Scott Bessent stating, open quote, My sense is that it could be dragged out over weeks, months, years, end quote. Now here, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act has cost importers about $133.5 billion up to mid-December last year. So looking to how will the country tariffs be altered in response to the ruling? Well, if we look at the trade-weighted average tariff rates in percentage terms, then the biggest country winners, i.e. those countries who have seen tariffs move lower, are Brazil, China, India, Canada, Mexico, Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia and Taiwan, while overall tariffs are set to increase for the UK, Italy, Singapore, France, EU, Germany, South Korea, Netherlands, Japan, Switzerland and Ireland. Now, how has the metal market reacted? Well, the initial response to the announcement from the Supreme Court last Friday caused a knee-jerk reaction in the US dollar, closing down for the day 0.1%, in turn supporting the base metal suite. However, as things stand in morning trading today, while the US dollar continues to come under pressure from the uncertain outlook for trade, the base metal market is little changed, even with the Chinese markets reopening after a week closure for the Chinese New Year. The base metal suite remains on track for a monthly decline in February. In our view, while a moderation in global tariffs provides a more bullish outlook for the industrial metals world, in reality, we face further unpredictability in trade policy, especially upon the potential introduction of further Section 301 tariffs and the limited nature of Section 122 tariffs without congressional approval. In addition to this, with Section 232 tariffs that impact copper, aluminium, steel, and automotives remaining unchanged, the distorted trade landscape and delay in potential investment decisions remains. Furthermore, we must address whether this latest setback for the Trump administration will result in an earlier ruling on tariffs on refined copper, which at present the market only holds a 3% chance of. Please note the deadline for the Department of Commerce to present a report to the President on domestic refining capacity and the market for refined copper falls on the 30th of June. Looking ahead, while the market continues to address these latest developments, eyes will be on the 24th and 25th of February, in which the Supreme Court will have 2 more opinion days. Although the court never reveals in advance what opinions it will release, there are 11 ongoing cases, including the ruling on Lisa Cook, which could impact the outlook for the Federal Reserve's independence.